If Vince McMahon is to be believed, all roads lead to the WWE. It's the top of the mountain, the pinnacle of the industry. It's every wrestler's goal to one day be at WrestleMania. The sudden influx of indie stars like Kevin Steen, Prince Devitt, El Generico, Kenta, Uhaa Nation, they all seems to validate that, but it's not everyone's dream. There are wrestlers like the Young Bucks, for example, for whom it's almost part of their notoriety that they've never wrestled for Vince, and then there's guys that everyone thinks haven't, but actually it turns out they have. I'm Adam from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 famous wrestlers you didn't know wrestled in WWE. Number 10, Samoa Joe. This would be higher on the list, but Joe decided to mess with me by signing a WWE contract a few months ago. The bastard. Before that, however, the Samoan Submission Machine was one of the biggest faces of the alternative to WWE, becoming one of the biggest stars in their two biggest American pro wrestling competitors, TNA and Ring of Honor. But did you know that prior to that, Samoa Joe wrestled a match for the WWE? In March 2001, a much leaner Joe wrestled a match on WWF Jacked against S.A. Rios, looking but a pale shade of the destroyer he would later become. Number 9, BRUISER BRODY. One of the most notorious wrestling free agents of the 70s and 80s, BRUISER BRODY was a highly influential figure amongst brawlers, being seen as a huge innovator of that style, especially in Japan. He seemed to wrestle for everyone but the McMahons in the NWA, New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, the AWA, WCCW, SCW, the list goes on. But before he really made his name, he wrestled in the WWF, as it was then known, for Vince McMahon Sr. against then-champion Bruno Sammartino. He was then fired for getting into an altercation backstage with Gorilla Monsoon. Number 8, the fabulous Freebirds. Well, most people know that Michael P.S. Hayes, the PS stands for Purely Sexy, I'm not kidding, has been true blue WWE stock for 20 years, but the fabulous Freebirds, one of the biggest stables in Southern wrestling history, never made the journey with him. The three-piece, consisting of Hayes, Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts, had a legendary tag team feud with the Von Erichs in Dallas for world-class championship wrestling. But briefly, very briefly, all three men were once part of the WWF. In 1984, the WWF were enjoying the rock and wrestling connection, and Cyndi Lauper was bringing huge attention to the product, so Vince wanted some more rock-style wrestlers. Enter the Freebirds. However, after wrestling for only a few weeks, they left the company, and it's rumoured that the reason they did so was because they had an altercation with Andre the Giant backstage after arriving to a show late. Don't mess with the Giant. Number 7, Christopher Daniels. Christopher Daniels, aka Curryman, yes, Curryman, has gained a reputation amongst fans as being the king of the indies, in reference to the fact that he's worked with pretty much every American independent promotion going, and also winning the first ever King of the Indies tournament for APW in 2000. He worked briefly for WCW, but made his name in Ring of Honor and TNA, especially where he worked for nearly a decade. But the veteran indie wrestler briefly worked for the WWE in the late 90s, most noticeably in a pair of matches with Taka Michinoku on Shotgun Saturday Night. These matches led to him becoming a hot property and moving elsewhere. Number 6, Tiger Mask. Tiger Mask is a phenomenon in Japan. It originally started as a manga series in the late 60s, which was then adapted into films and a pair of anime series, the first of which ran for over 100 episodes. In the 80s, New Japan Pro Wrestling created a Tiger Mask and gave it to Satoru Sayama, I hope I pronounced that correctly. With an exciting blend of mat skills, kickboxing and high flying, he became a huge star. In the following years, 4 other wrestlers would don the Tiger Mask character, but did you know that Sayama, the first Tiger Mask, wrestled for the WWF? At the time, Vince's company had a talent sharing deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Tiger Mask wrestled a number of matches in Madison Square Garden, establishing a fast following. Number 5, Kevin Von Erich. Kevin Von Erich is a WWE Hall of Famer and one of the biggest legends in Texas wrestling history. As part of the Von Erich family, with his 4 brothers, all of whom are now tragically dead, Kevin engaged in the lauded Freebird versus Von Erichs feud, and his high-flying style and good looks and his decision to wrestle barefoot made him a megastar. Despite making brief travels during his career, Kevin stayed at home in Texas with world-class championship wrestling, his father's promotion, for nearly the entirety of his wrestling life. However, one of his brief travels was in 1980, where he wrestled one match for the WWF in Madison Square Garden, beating Johnny Rodz. Then back to Texas he went. Number 4, AJ Styles. Yep, AJ worked for Vince. Jim Ross regards WWE not snapping up AJ Styles as one of the biggest mistakes it's made in a decade, and he's right. The man has gone on to become one of the very best wrestlers in the world, producing 5-star Match of the Year candidates for TNA, Ring of Honor, and lately New Japan Pro Wrestling, but he did wrestle for WWE. He was under contract for WCW when Vince purchased the company, but despite his contract not being picked up, he was given a match against the Hurricane on WWF Metal in January 2002 and a few more on Jacked. He was offered a developmental contract in April of that year, but turned it down. what could have been. Number 3, Kevin Sullivan, a more dyed-in-the-wool WCW loyalist it's hard to find. Sullivan worked in one capacity or another with the now defunct promotion for 13 years. He was the Taskmaster and infamously led the Dungeon of Doom, which was terrible. A bunch of weirdos hanging around in creepy rooms and being vaguely spooky. They're like the Saturday morning cartoon version of the Wyatt family. But years before he was a mainstay for the other guys, Sullivan worked for Vince Sr. in WWF. For a number of years in the 70s, he worked the mid-card as a babyface, never receiving a proper push because he was deemed to be too short. Number 2, Public Enemy, the signature tag team of ECW during its early years. Their feud with the Gangsters epitomizes classic ECW for many fans. Their brawling style and creative use of weapons such as tables got them over in a huge way. They were also involved in the Throw Me a Chair incident, becoming buried under an avalanche of steel chairs thrown by a mental crowd. Yikes. Both WWF and WCW came calling, and they initially chose WCW, winning the tag titles for the company but otherwise achieving minimal success. They then signed with the WWF in 1999 but quickly fell foul of the locker room because they chose to sign with the other guys first. After being brutalized by the Acolytes, Public Enemy left the company after only a few months. Number 1, Mr. Wrestling 2, a presidential choice. During the territorial age of wrestling, John Walker, aka Mr. Wrestling 2, was one of the biggest stars in Florida and Georgia. So much so that he was President Jimmy Carter's favorite wrestler. He was invited to the president's inauguration, but he couldn't attend because the Secret Service wanted him to remove his mask, which he couldn't risk. He did, however, receive a private audience with President Carter's mother. Not like that. Despite being one of the Southeast's biggest stars, Mr. Wrestling 2 did briefly work for the WWF during the twilight of his career when Vince bought Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1984. He was pretty out of shape at the time, and he was gone from the company by 1985. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Tell us about it in the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and you can even follow me on Twitter here. I'm Adam from WhatCulture.com, and I'll see you soon.